All right, second grade, I'm going to continue reading our story, Chocolate Fever. Remember last time we left off with Henry Green. He was at the hospital and the doctor found out that everyone was looking at him and that those spots were chocolate, just straight up chocolate. And Dr. Fargo said, that boy is nothing more than a walking candy bar. Crazy. All right, so chapter 6 is Catch That Boy. Let's see what happens to Henry and what he does. All these people looking at him. I'd be pretty overwhelmed, so we'll find out what Henry does. Chapter 6. There was more excitement than Henry had ever seen. All kinds of doctors were examining him now, poking and prodding as if he were not a boy, but a pincushion. And Dr. Fargo was bounding around the room talking about chocolate fever, a new disease, making medical history, and things like that. Henry was tired and afraid. He wanted to be left alone. He wanted all the doctors to go away. He wanted to be home. He wanted, in fact, to be just about any place in the world except this hospital. How many of you would feel like Henry? I know I probably would. So he did something very simple, something his heart told him he had to do to survive. He jumped off the examining table and began to run. In a flash, he had bolted through the doorway and was running down the long corridor. Behind him, he heard shouts of, "Stop and catch that boy!" Two nurses at the end of the corridor tried to catch him, but Henry was simply too quick. He dodged past them and darted down the stairway. Down, down, down he went. Down 3 whole flights of stairs and out into the main lobby of the hospital. Ahead of him, a guard at the door held out an arm. Running as hard as he could, Henry crashed through his grasp and into the street. Without pausing to think where he was headed, Henry ran. As he was about to turn the corner, he looked back. There was a whole army of people pursuing him. There they are down the streets. Doctors in white coats, nurses, guards blowing whistles, policemen waving their arms, and behind them he could see Dr. Fargo. Henry didn't wait to see any more. "Legs," he said, "don't fail me now." And with that, he turned the corner and took off down the street. He ran and ran until he had no breath left, and then he ran some more. His legs flashing in the afternoon sun, Henry darted down one street and up another. He had no idea of where he was going. He had no idea where he was going. He still kept running. People stared at him as he whizzed by. A few even raised their hands as if to stop him or say something, but Henry kept right on running. After a long while, he couldn't see or hear any of the people running after him. I must be far ahead of them by now, Henry thought. But suddenly, up ahead at the corner, a police car flashed by with its siren screaming. They must be after me, he thought. I'm a wanted man. Sick at heart, Henry pushed himself to run faster. His head hurt, his side hurt, his legs hurt, but he kept running. His lungs hurt, his eyes hurt, even his hair began to hurt, but Henry kept running. At last, he could run no more. He was finished, done. He had to rest, and to rest, he had to hide. Without thinking about it, Henry ran down a large grassy alley and lay between 2 white houses. At the end of the alley was a large garage with one door partly open. Henry sneaked in and looked around. There was an automobile parked inside, but not a person in sight. With his last bit of strength, he flopped down on the floor beside the automobile. A fine mess you're in now, he thought. You've run away from the hospital, the police are after you, your mother must be scared to death with worry, and you have a disease no one has ever heard of before. The more he thought about his predicament, the sadder Henry became. A lump rose in his throat. A tear ran down his cheek. A sob escaped from his lips, and he was crying, sobbing out loud, really crying. He cried for a few moments because he was so sad. He cried some more because he was lost. And then he cried for a long, long time because everything had become so hopeless. At last, when he could cry no more, Henry dried his eyes and tried to think out his situation. He would not go back to Dr. Fargo in the hospital, of that he was certain. Nothing on Earth or any other planet could make him do that. But what if he went home? What would his mother and father do? They would take him back to Dr. Fargo and the hospital. They would have to. Never, Henry said aloud. Never, never, never. In the dim light of the garage, Henry looked at the big brown spots on his arm and began to hate them. Stupid spots, he thought. Why do you have to happen to me? Feeling angry, he stood up and began to pace the half-empty garage. I can't go home, he thought, and I won't go back to the hospital. All right then, I'm on my own. Somewhere there must be a place for me. A place to go until these stupid big brown spots disappear. A place far away where no one has ever heard of me, or the hospital, or Dr. Fargo, or my parents. Feeling much braver now, with things somehow settled in his mind, Henry lay down to rest for a while before setting off on his journey. Okay, so Henry is gonna run like a fugitive. He thinks he is on his own because everything else seems so hopeless. If you were Henry, what would you do? Would you want to go and find your parents? Or would you go back to the hospital? Would you try to make it on your own? He seems like kind of in quite a predicament. All right, chapter 7 is in the schoolyard. Where do you guys think Henry is gonna go? He's on the run on his own. We'll see where he ends up. Chapter 7. It was almost 2 hours later now, and the sun was somewhat lower in the sky. Henry looked cautiously out of the garage, saw no one, and started on his way. He walked for a long time, trying to stay on the side streets and being careful to avoid attention. It was not easy. People kept staring at him. Henry ignored them and kept on walking. In the middle of the street down which he was walking stood a school. Henry could see lots of boys playing in the schoolyard. He decided to walk through the yard to get to the next street. As he started through, all the boys stopped playing basketball and pitching in and roller skate hockey to look at him. It was as if all the noise and action had become frozen, like a movie or a TV show that stopped suddenly. Henry kept going. As he was about halfway through, just about in the middle of the yard, the kids seemed to come to life again. In less time than it takes to tell about it, he was surrounded. Henry looked around him. All the boys stared back. They had formed a tight circle around him. Henry didn't like it. One of the tallest boys, who looked a good deal older than Henry, spoke up. "Boy, you are ugly," he said. "Yeah," said another boy in the crowd, "really ugly." "Ugly," echoed another boy. I'd better be polite, Henry thought. "Excuse me," he said in a quiet voice. "Could I get through, please?" The boys didn't move. The big boy, who seemed to be a leader, spoke again. "I've seen pimples before, but those are ridiculous." "They're not pimples," another boy said. "They're warts." "Yeah, warts," said another. "They gotta be warts." Now all the boys were speaking up. "Ugliest warts in the whole world." "In the world? Man, they are the ugliest warts in the universe." "I thought I seen ugly kids before, but this one is out of sight. Horrible, disgusting, revolting. And he smells, too," a fat boy with glasses said. "Yuck, like a stupid candy factory. Nauseating." The more the boys called him names, the worse Henry felt. He opened his mouth to say something, but nothing came out. How would you guys feel if people started calling you names like that? I'd feel pretty horrible, like Henry. The big boy in the crowd held up his hands to silence the others. "Quiet down, you guys," he said. "I want to talk to Mr. Ugly here." In a few moments, the crowd was silent. "Now then," the big one said. "You, Mr. Ugly, what's your name, kid?" Before Henry answered, he thought carefully. He was ashamed of himself and the way he looked, but he was even more ashamed of the gang around him. How dare they act so mean? He hadn't harmed them, and now, when he could certainly use a friend, they had clearly marked him as an enemy. Henry got angry, but he kept his anger firmly under control. My name is my own business, he said. It's no concern of yours. Woo! The gang hooted and shouted at Henry's reply. A few even whistled. Don't be fresh, kid, the big boy said. We don't like fresh kids around here. A few larger boys edged closer to Henry, closing the ring around him tighter. Let me hit him, Frankie, a voice said. Let me get him, another boy said. Henry thought quickly. Touch me and you die, he said. I have a rare and mysterious disease. Whoever touches me will catch it and die a horrible death. The gang stopped closing in on Henry. Oh yeah, said the big boy. You expect us to believe that? I don't care whether you believe it or not, said Henry. You're bluffing. Bluffing? Said Henry. Touch me and you'll find out if I'm bluffing. I have chocolate fever, one of the most horrible and catching diseases in the whole world. Chocolate fever? Echoed the big boy. You're making it up. Henry could see that he had the crowd on the run. Chocolate fever is the worst disease ever discovered on Earth, he said. You know what happens if you get chocolate fever? Your whole head swells up. Your mouth gets dry. You break out in big chocolate spots, like me. There's Henry and the boys. You begin to look ugly. And then the really bad stuff begins. The boys were listening closely now, and the circle around him was beginning to widen as the gang started to back away. He's making it up, fellas, Big Boy said. Don't listen to him. But the boys were listening all right and believing every word. Henry began to walk towards the boys. As he did, they made way for him. Slowly, a path opened, giving him room to get by. I don't want you to die, Henry said as he passed through the ring of boys, so you'd just better let me be on my way. None of the boys tried to stop him. Even Big Boy, as Henry passed close by, made no move to touch him. Just as Henry neared the outer ring of boys, he heard one of them exclaim, Hey, I know who he is. I heard it on the radio when I came home from school. There's a kid who ran away from the hospital this morning, and the police are looking for him. His name is Henry Green. Big Boy called out as Henry kept walking. Is that you, kid? Are you Henry Green? Henry Green? Henry called over his shoulder. Never heard of him. Just the same, as soon as he was clear of the schoolyard, Henry broke into a run and didn't stop until he had left the gang far, far behind him. So Henry was a little quick on his feet. He used some quick thinking to get him out of another horrible situation. Chapter 8 is Mac. So we will see where Henry goes after this. Stay tuned as we keep reading and find out if Henry ever gets rid of these chocolate spots.